The story begins with a man who seems to have everything he could possibly want. He's wealthy, successful in his career, and has a beautiful family, a wife he once loved, and children who adore him. They live in a luxurious home, surrounded by the finest things money can buy. On the surface, it looks like a dream come true. But beneath the surface, the man feels something is missing. Despite his outward success, there's an emptiness inside him that grows with each passing year. His marriage, once full of passion and excitement, has become routine. The love he shared with his wife has faded, replaced by the comfort of familiarity. They no longer have the late-night talks or spontaneous adventures that once defined their relationship. Instead, they've become two people living in the same house, but drifting further apart emotionally. The man tries to ignore these feelings, telling himself that this is just part of life. But the emptiness only deepens, and he finds himself longing for something more. One day, he meets a younger woman, a woman full of energy, with a vibrant personality that instantly captivates him. She's everything he feels he's been missing. Spontaneous, fun, and full of life. Every moment spent with her feels like a new adventure, something he hasn't experienced in years. At first, it's exciting, and he tells himself that maybe this is the spark he's been looking for. The younger woman represents everything his marriage no longer is. The more time he spends with her, the more he becomes convinced that she's the answer to his unhappiness. Slowly, the idea of leaving his wife and starting over begins to feel like a possibility, something that could give him the excitement and fulfillment he's been craving. After weeks of internal conflict, the man finally makes the decision to leave. He sits down with his wife and explains that he feels their relationship is no longer working. He tells her that he needs something different, something that will bring back the joy and excitement he feels he's lost. His wife is devastated, heartbroken by his words. She never saw it coming, and she can't understand how he could abandon everything they've built together. But despite her pain, she tries to remain strong and tells him she wants him to be happy, even if that means he has to leave. The man moves out of their shared home and into a new place with the younger woman. The new relationship feels like a fresh start. At first, everything is perfect. They travel together, enjoying the life of luxury and freedom that comes with the man's wealth. The younger woman is everything he imagined she would be: fun, exciting, and unpredictable. It feels like they're living in a dream world, one that's full of adventure and joy. But as time passes, the man begins to feel a strange emptiness again. The excitement of the new relationship starts to fade, and the joy he thought he'd find in this new life is short-lived. He begins to realize that the woman, while vibrant and full of life, doesn't fulfill him in the way he hoped. The emotional connection he thought he would find is still missing, and he starts to question if he made the right decision. The excitement he sought has turned into another routine, and the man finds himself back where he started, feeling empty and lost. This is where the man's journey truly begins, as he faces the consequences of his decisions and starts to reflect on what truly matters in life. The man had hoped that leaving his wife and starting fresh with the younger woman would bring him the happiness he had been searching for, but as time passed, reality began to sink in. The excitement that had once filled their days began to fade, and the relationship, which had initially seemed so perfect, started to show cracks. The thrill of the newness had worn off, and he found himself missing the things he had taken for granted before, things he never truly appreciated while he had them. The younger woman, though lively and vibrant, was not the answer to his problems. She filled the space in his life with distractions, but she couldn't offer the deep connection that he now realized he needed. At first, they had spent their time traveling, exploring new places, and indulging in the luxury his wealth could provide. They went to expensive restaurants, stayed in fancy hotels, and attended lavish parties. It felt like living in a fairy tale, but now that the dust had settled, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. He tried to push those feelings aside, telling himself that this was the life he had chosen, and he should embrace it. But deep down, he knew that he wasn't truly happy. The younger woman's company was enjoyable, but it was surface level. They didn't connect on a deeper emotional level the way he had with his wife, and he began to feel more and more disconnected from her as time went on. She was fun, but she wasn't the person he could turn to for support or understanding when things got difficult. The man started to realize how much he had taken for granted in his old life. His ex-wife, while not perfect, had been someone he could count on. She had always been there for him, providing emotional support and stability. She knew him in ways no one else did. But now, with the younger woman, there was an emotional void that he couldn't ignore. The superficial joys of wealth and luxury no longer brought him the satisfaction he thought they would. He was beginning to understand that the things that mattered most, love, trust, and companionship, couldn't be replaced by material wealth or fleeting excitement. Meanwhile, the younger woman began to sense his growing dissatisfaction. She noticed that he wasn't as engaged in their relationship as he had been at the beginning. His attention drifted, and there was an underlying tension between them. She, too, had once been drawn to his wealth and status, but now she was beginning to feel the strain of their relationship. The man's dissatisfaction was becoming more apparent, and she wasn't sure how to fix it. She wanted to keep the spark alive, but no matter how hard she tried, it was clear that their connection wasn't the same. As time went on, the man's loneliness grew. Despite all the external factors that seemed to be perfect, wealth, beauty, and excitement, he couldn't escape the emptiness inside. He realized he had made a mistake, not just in leaving his wife, but in seeking happiness in the wrong places. The relationship with the younger woman had promised freedom and happiness, but instead, it had only left him feeling more isolated. He couldn't ignore it any longer. His past, his family, and the love he had once shared with his wife were constantly on his mind. He started to wonder if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Would he ever be able to find true happiness again, or had he sacrificed the most meaningful thing for a life of momentary pleasures? These questions haunted him as he tried to navigate his new life, unsure of where it was leading. As time went on, the man found himself reflecting more and more on his past decisions. The initial excitement of his new life with the younger woman had faded, and he was left with a growing sense of regret. He missed the stability and emotional depth he once had with his ex-wife. Despite their differences, she had always been there for him, supporting him through difficult times. She had been his partner in every sense of the word. Now, as he looked at his current life, he realized how much he had taken her for granted. Meanwhile, his ex-wife, who had been devastated by his decision to leave, had started to rebuild her life. At first, she had struggled with the pain of the divorce. It was hard for her to understand how the man, who had once been her everything, could walk away so easily. But over time, she learned to accept the situation. She focused on raising their children, providing them with love and care, and finding strength in herself. The ex-wife's life was far from perfect, but she found solace in her children. She was determined to give them a stable and loving home, even without the man by her side. She became more independent, rediscovering her own passions and building a life that didn't revolve around the man who had left her. She focused on work, friendships, and self-care. Slowly, she began to heal from the heartbreak and disappointment, even though a part of her would always wonder what could have been. In the years that followed, the man's relationship with the younger woman continued to deteriorate. The emotional distance between them grew, and the man found himself increasingly disconnected from her. He started to realize that the excitement of their initial connection had been based on the thrill of something new, not on a deep emotional bond. She was fun, but she couldn't offer him the emotional fulfillment he had once found with his ex-wife. Despite the challenges in his new relationship, the man didn't want to admit that he had made a mistake. He told himself that he had made the right choice. He was living the life he had always dreamed of. But the truth was that he wasn't happy. The lifestyle he had chosen, filled with luxury and material comforts, no longer brought him joy. He had sacrificed something far more meaningful in the pursuit of freedom and excitement, and now he felt the weight of that decision. As he thought more about his ex-wife and children, the man realized that he had lost something irreplaceable. He had left behind a family who had once meant everything to him, and in doing so, he had broken the bond they had shared. The thought of how much his decision had hurt his children troubled him the most. They had been young when he left, and though they had adapted to life without him, he knew they would never forget the pain he caused them. The man's regrets began to grow stronger with each passing day. He couldn't help but wonder if he could ever fix the damage he had done. Would his ex-wife ever forgive him? Would his children ever see him as the father they once loved? He knew that it would take more than just words to make things right, and he wasn't sure if he had the strength or the time to do so. His life, which had seemed so perfect on the outside, was unraveling. The man was beginning to understand that happiness wasn't something that could be bought or found in a new relationship. It came from the connections he had with the people he truly cared about. And now, those connections were fractured, leaving him with a deep sense of loss. One day, the man found himself walking down the street, lost in thought. His mind wandered to the past, and the memories of his ex-wife and children flooded back. It had been years since their separation, but the feeling of regret still lingered in his heart. As he walked, he stumbled upon a cafe he used to visit with his ex-wife before everything had changed. The place hadn't changed much. It still had the same warm atmosphere, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. For a moment, he stood frozen outside, unable to shake off the memories that came rushing back. The man pushed the door open and walked inside. As soon as he entered, the familiar faces of the cafe's regulars greeted him with a smile, but it wasn't the same. He didn't have his wife by his side, and it felt like something was missing. He ordered a coffee and sat by the window, staring out at the busy street. His thoughts drifted back to the conversation he had once had with his ex-wife here, the last one before their relationship began to unravel. He remembered her words, her concerns, and the way she had pleaded with him not to leave. At the time, he hadn't listened. He had been so caught up in his desire for something new, something exciting, that he ignored the pain he was causing her. As he sat there, lost in thought, the door opened again, and he heard a familiar voice. It was his ex-wife. She was standing at the counter, ordering a coffee, just as she had done many times before. The sight of her made his heart skip a beat. She looked different, of course, older, more confident, but still familiar in a way that stirred something deep inside him. He hadn't seen her in years, and he couldn't help but notice how much she had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had been devastated by his departure. She was stronger now, her face showing a sense of peace and self-assurance that he had never seen before. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should he approach her, or should he leave? Part of him feared that she would still be angry, that the years of hurt and betrayal would be too much to overcome. But another part of him felt a pull to reconnect, to see if there was any possibility of mending the broken pieces of their relationship. After a long pause, he stood up and walked over to her. When she saw him, her expression was a mix of surprise and guarded caution. She hadn't expected to see him here, not after everything that had happened. But there was no anger in her eyes, just a quiet sadness, as if she had long accepted the fact that their paths had diverged. "Hi," he said, his voice uncertain. "It's been a long time." She smiled faintly. "Yes, it has. How have you been?" The conversation started out slow, awkward even, as they both tried to navigate the emotions that lingered between them. They spoke about the past, the changes in their lives, and how they had both moved on. The man found himself amazed by how much his ex-wife had grown. She was no longer the woman who had relied on him for happiness. She had found her own way, built her own life. It was clear that she had found peace, something he had been searching for but hadn't yet discovered. They talked for hours, catching up on everything they had missed in each other's lives. But as the conversation progressed, the man began to feel the weight of his past decisions more than ever. His regret deepened as he realized just how much he had taken her and their life together for granted. He understood now that he had been blind to what truly mattered, and that the love and stability he had once shared with her were irreplaceable. As the time came to say goodbye, he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to face the reality that things could never be the same again. But he knew that their meeting was a step forward, a chance to acknowledge the past and learn from it. Though he could never undo the hurt he had caused, he felt a sense of closure. The pain he had carried for so long was beginning to ease, and for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could find peace within himself. As he walked out of the cafe, he realized that the road to redemption wasn't easy, and it wasn't guaranteed. But meeting his ex-wife again had given him something valuable, a glimpse of the possibility that healing could begin, even after all these years. Years had passed since that meeting in the cafe, but the man couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with his ex-wife. It had given him more clarity than he expected. He realized that while he had once thought leaving her was the answer to his unhappiness, it had only led him down a lonely path. Yet, as time had gone on, he found himself feeling differently about the choices he had made. The young woman he had left his wife for could not provide the deep connection he needed. She had been exciting and new, but he now understood that excitement alone could not sustain a relationship. But despite his regrets, the man couldn't change what had already happened. His ex-wife had moved on, and so had he, though he knew he was still searching for something real and meaningful. It was clear to him that he had to make peace with his past before he could truly move forward. One day, out of the blue, he received a call that left him stunned. It was from a man he didn't recognize at first, someone who claimed to have information about a group of quadruplets who looked strikingly similar to him. The man's curiosity piqued, and he agreed to meet. What he heard next shook him to his core. The quadruplets, it turned out, were the result of an affair he had during the years he was still married to his ex-wife. He had no idea that these children even existed. But now, as they were approaching their 20s, they had grown up in another part of the country, raised by a single mother who had never told them who their father was. The more the man learned about the quadruplets, the more he couldn't believe what he was hearing. The resemblance to him was undeniable. They looked just like him, in ways that even his own children didn't. The realization hit him hard. He had a part of his past that he had never acknowledged, a part that was just as important as the family he had left behind. As he thought about these 4 young adults, a sense of responsibility washed over him. They were part of him, and even though they didn't know it, he was part of them. The idea that they had grown up without knowing who he was troubled him deeply. What kind of father could he be to children he never even knew existed? The man felt a wave of guilt and regret. He had made choices in the past that had led him to this point, but now he realized he had an opportunity to change the course of things. He could try to get to know the quadruplets, to see if there was any chance to build a relationship with them. But he also knew that he couldn't expect them to forgive him immediately, or to welcome him into their lives without questions. They had lived their entire lives without him, and he had to accept that he couldn't just walk in and expect everything to fall into place. Despite the uncertainty, he decided to meet them. He reached out to the woman who had raised them, and she agreed to a meeting. It was a strange feeling, knowing that he was about to meet 4 young adults who were part of him, but whom he had never known. He had no idea how they would react to him, or if they would even want to know him. But as he prepared for the meeting, something inside him changed. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. The past was behind him, and while he could never undo the mistakes he had made, he knew that he had a chance to do better. The chance to meet his quadruplets and try to build something meaningful with them was an opportunity he could not let slip away. And so, with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, the man awaited the moment he would finally come face to face with the children he never knew he had. The day finally arrived when the man was about to meet the quadruplets. He felt a whirlwind of emotions: excitement, nervousness, and even fear. He wasn't sure what to expect, how they would react to him, or if they would even want to have anything to do with him. He had spent years living without them. And now, after all this time, he was about to face the consequences of his actions. The meeting took place in a quiet park, chosen by the woman who had raised them. She had been hesitant at first, unsure of how the quadruplets would feel about meeting their biological father, but eventually she agreed. As the man arrived, his heart raced. He saw them before they saw him. The resemblance was uncanny. They were standing together, talking among themselves, but as he watched from a distance, he couldn't help but notice how much they looked like him. It was as if the past had come rushing back to him in the form of 4 young adults. When they turned and saw him standing there, the moment was almost surreal. They stared at him for a moment, their expressions unreadable. He couldn't tell if they recognized him right away, or if they were just trying to process who this stranger was. The man felt a lump form in his throat. He wanted to speak, to introduce himself, but he wasn't sure where to begin. The woman who had raised the quadruplets, a kind and patient woman, took a step forward. "This is the man I told you about," she said, her voice steady. "The one I told you was your father." The quadruplets looked at him, their faces a mix of curiosity and hesitation. One of them, a young woman with striking green eyes, was the first to speak. "So, you're our father?" she asked, her voice soft, but with a hint of uncertainty. The man nodded, trying to find the right words. "Yes, I am," he said, his voice trembling. "I had no idea you existed until recently. He paused, struggling to continue. "I never meant to hurt you or your mother. I made mistakes, and I'm truly sorry for that." There was an awkward silence as the quadruplets exchanged glances. It was clear they were processing everything he had just said, trying to make sense of the situation. The man felt a mix of guilt and hope, unsure of how to break through the walls they had likely built up over the years. Finally, one of the younger men, with short brown hair and a quiet demeanor, spoke up. "Why didn't you try to find us sooner?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry, but there was a clear sense of confusion. "We've grown up without a father, and now you're here, saying you're sorry. Why should we believe you?" The question stung, but the man knew it was fair. He had no excuse for the years of absence. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I know I've missed so much, and I can't change that. But I'm here now, and I'd like the chance to get to know you, if you'll let me." There was a long pause, and the man wondered if he had made a mistake even showing up. But then the woman with the green eyes spoke again, her voice more gentle this time. "We don't know you. We've grown up without you." But she hesitated, as if trying to find the right words. "But maybe we could start with that. Getting to know you." The man's heart lifted slightly. It wasn't an easy decision for them, and he understood that. It would take time, and they might never fully accept him as their father. But there was a chance, just a small chance, that he could make amends for the years of absence and show them he cared. They agreed to spend the afternoon together, and over the course of the next few hours, they spoke more about their lives. The quadruplets shared their experiences, their dreams, and even some of the struggles they had faced growing up without their father. The man listened intently, absorbing every word. He realized how much he had missed by not being there for them. The connection he had longed for with them was slowly starting to form, but he knew it would take time and effort to build trust and establish a relationship. As the sun began to set, the man felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. The road ahead was uncertain, and there were no guarantees, but for the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he could begin to repair the broken pieces of his past. It wouldn't be easy, and the journey would be long, but meeting the quadruplets was a start, one he wasn't willing to give up on. As the man spent more time with the quadruplets, he began to understand just how much he had missed in their lives. Each of them was different, with their own personalities, dreams, and experiences, yet there was an undeniable connection that tied them together. The more he learned about them, the more he regretted not being there for them when they were younger. They had grown up without a father, and though they were now adults, the absence of that presence had shaped who they were. The first few meetings were awkward, with moments of silence and uncertainty. The quadruplets were cautious, unsure of how to view him, while the man was burdened with guilt for the years he had lost. They didn't know him, and they had no reason to trust him immediately. Every conversation seemed to bring up painful memories, both for the man and for them. They asked questions that he struggled to answer. They wanted to know why he hadn't been there for them, and why he had left their mother. At first, the man didn't have the right answers. He couldn't explain why he made the choices he did, and that made it harder for the quadruplets to understand. They wanted to know if he truly regretted his actions, if he had really changed, or if he was just looking for some way to fix his past mistakes. He didn't blame them for being skeptical. After all, they had every right to question his intentions. Over time, though, the man began to show them who he was. He spent time with them, not as a father trying to force a connection, but as someone who genuinely wanted to learn about their lives and become a part of it. He listened when they spoke, offering advice when they asked for it, but more often, he simply offered his presence, something he had never given them before. One evening, they all gathered together at a small cafe where they could talk without distractions. The atmosphere was relaxed, and for the first time, the man felt a sense of ease with them. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The quadruplets shared stories about their childhoods, their struggles with growing up without a father, and the moments that had shaped them. It wasn't easy for them to open up, but the man listened, and with each story, he saw how resilient they were. It was a turning point. The man realized that even though they were all different, they shared a bond that could never be broken. The years of separation hadn't erased the connection they had, but it had made it harder to rebuild. Still, he wasn't going to give up on them. He knew it would take time, years, perhaps, for them to fully trust him. But they were beginning to see that he wasn't just a man trying to make up for his past mistakes. He was someone who wanted to be a part of their future, someone who was committed to being there for them from now on. The quadruplets, though hesitant at first, started to warm to him. They still had questions, doubts, and moments of anger, but they also saw a man who wasn't running away from his past anymore. He was trying, in his own way, to be the father they deserved. And slowly, they began to let their walls down. It wasn't about him fixing everything right away, but about showing them that he was there for the long haul, willing to put in the effort to prove that he cared. Each small victory felt like a step forward. A shared laugh, a conversation about their hopes for the future, a simple gesture of kindness. It all started to add up, though there were still moments of awkwardness, and it was clear that there was much work to be done. The man felt a sense of hope for the first time in years. His past mistakes didn't define him anymore. His actions moving forward would. It was becoming clear to him that the road to redemption wasn't about making everything perfect. It was about showing up, being consistent, and taking responsibility for the years lost. The man knew that he couldn't change the past, but he was beginning to see that he could still shape the future, one conversation, one moment at a time. As the man continued to spend more time with the quadruplets, a sense of understanding began to form between them. It was still a fragile bond, one that had to be built carefully, but each passing day brought a little more trust, a little more warmth. He wasn't just a stranger in their lives anymore. He was becoming someone they could rely on, someone who genuinely cared about their future. The man knew it wasn't going to be easy. Years of absence couldn't be erased overnight, but he also realized that the key wasn't in trying to erase the past. It was in embracing it, acknowledging his mistakes, and doing everything he could to make things right from this point onward. It was about the small, meaningful moments, the ones where he showed up for them, listened to them, and proved that he wanted to be a part of their lives. One evening, after weeks of casual meetings, the quadruplets invited him to dinner. It was their way of taking another step forward, showing that they were beginning to accept him, even if they hadn't completely forgiven him yet. The man felt a mix of emotions: nervousness, hope, and a sense of gratitude. As they sat around the table, laughing and sharing stories, it was the first time he truly felt like he was part of their family again. It wasn't about him trying to be the perfect father. It was about being there, being real, and letting the connection grow naturally. Throughout dinner, they talked about their lives, their dreams, their passions, the things they had accomplished. The man listened intently, proud of how far they had come. There was a lightness in the air, a feeling of shared connection that hadn't existed in their relationship before. For the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like a father, in the way that mattered most: present, engaged, and supportive. As the night wore on, the quadruplets began to open up more, sharing moments from their childhood that had shaped them. They talked about the challenges of growing up without a father figure, how they had learned to rely on each other, and how their mother had been their rock. The man listened with a heavy heart, understanding just how much they had missed. He couldn't change the past, but he could learn from it, and he could be the kind of father they needed now. After dinner, as they all said their goodbyes, one of the quadruplets, the young woman with the green eyes, pulled him aside. "I never thought I'd be able to have a relationship with you," she said softly, looking up at him. "But I see now that you really do care. I'm not saying everything's fixed, but I think we can try." The man's heart swelled with emotion. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a sign that they were willing to try. That meant more to him than anything else. He had no illusions about how hard the road ahead would be, but in that moment, he felt a sense of peace. They were giving him a chance to prove that he could be the father they deserved, even if it took time. Over the following months, the man continued to build his relationship with the quadruplets. Each day was a new opportunity to show them that he was there for the long haul. There were moments of frustration, moments when old wounds resurfaced, but there were also moments of joy, of laughter, and of deep connection. Slowly, the walls between them came down, brick by brick. They weren't the same family they had once been, but they were becoming something new, something stronger. The man understood now that true redemption wasn't about erasing mistakes. It was about owning them, learning from them, and making the most of the time that remained. He couldn't undo the years he had lost, but he could create new memories with his children, memories that would last a lifetime. As the story came to an end, the man realized that life had given him a second chance. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that, he knew, was enough.